Hey guys, this is Byakuya Kuchiki here with a deck profile. I'd like to start off and introduce myself. Been playing the game for a while. This channel will be deck profiles, and occasionally we'll do a couple of duels here and there with the decks. And without further ado, here we go. This deck, I guess we'll call it Constellars. I highly recommend you use it. It's easy for beginners, and for people new to the game, they don't know which type of summoning technique they want to use. XZ Summon is very simple, very easy, so this is a good deck to kind of start off and introduce people to the game. And here we'll run 2 Photon Thrashers, which is highly useful. If your opponent has a monster, you don't, summon him out, which ties in with these 3. I'm running 3 Constellar Cosses, which his effect is pretty easy, very simple. You target one Constellar monster on the field to activate one of these effects. And you can use this effect twice per turn, which enables you to XZ summon a rank 5 XZ monster. And then I run 3 Pollux because, in addition, if you want to summon a rank 5 monster, you can summon him and then summon costs due to Pollux's effect and increase them both to level 5. Then I'll run YGODB. His effect is pretty much the same as Pollux, except he special summons, not normal summon. And then I run a Brotherhood of the Fire Fist Bear. This card is very easy because it enables you to set a fire formation spell or trap card, which, if you look down here, I am running fire formation Tenenki. And this card, not only does it let you add a Beast Warrior from your deck to your hand, your Beast Warriors gain 100 attack, which is useful if your opponent has, for example, the trap card Vanity's Emptiness out on the field. You can't special summon. It's a simple way to power up, for example, Constellar Costs. And I think I'll move on now to Constellar Sombre. His effect is very nice, very useful, because it activates in the graveyard. And you can summon him, and if it was destroyed that turn, you can normal summon 1 Constellar monster for 1 list tribute, which really doesn't mean a lot, so really just ignore his effect. But if he's out on the field, you can banish 1 monster from your graveyard, special summon 1 Constellar monster. I'm sorry, I stand corrected. You can banish 1 Constellar monster from your graveyard, then target 1 Constellar monster in your graveyard and add it to the hand. So, if you have Sombre out of the field, and, for example, say you have Costs, you want to pull off a big combo next turn, this is a good card to launch a comeback. So, I recommend running 3. But next, I'm going to move on to Honest, which his effect is pretty useful, very widely known, and I highly recommend you use it. It's very easy, quick and easy to make a comeback. And then I'll sit there and I'll end my monsters with Constellar Scythe, which, if your opponent controls a monster, you control none, special summon him, and then you can target 1 Constellar monster you control or in your graveyard, which it could be a level 4, a level 5, it all depends with what XZ's monsters you summon. This deck runs off XZ's, but we will get to that later in the video. Now then, we have 2 instant fusions, which I will move down to the 2 fusion monsters I have. Elder God Nodin and Panda Dragon. Elder God Nodin, if Constellar monsters in your graveyard, you can special summon them out onto the field, which could enable you, theoretically, to pull off a big combo. And then there's Panzer Dragon, which his effect is pretty cool because instant fusion, of course, it is destroyed during the end phase, which it is sent to the graveyard, but Panzer Dragon's effect will activate, which is pretty nice because then you, as last resort, you can also pop one of his monsters. But at the same time, if you have a level 5 monster already out on the field, for example Koss, then you can just activate instant fusion, summon Panzer Dragon, and there you go. And now I will move on to Raigeki. Very simple effect. Pop all your opponent's monsters. Highly recommend it. And reinforcement of the army. Of course, you add one warrior type monster from your deck to your hand. Now, if you play Dueling Network or YGO Pro, Dev Pro, whatever platform you play, sometimes you just get the worst draws. Reinforcement of the army is one of those cards that can really help you out in a tight spot. So I really recommend you to at least run it. And then there's Mystical Space Typhoon, which, very self-explanatory. You don't know what your opponent's back row is, but it's always worth taking the chance. And then there's Book of Moon, which I run it because if someone has, for example, Silent Honor Arc, his effect is pretty nasty. If you're trying to pull off a big combo with an Xyz monster, he can pretty much stop it in its tracks. But this card is very useful, very handy, and you can then put it face down on the field and then attack it with pretty much any monster in this deck, ultimately destroying it. Then we'll move on to the 3-4 formation Tenenkis. These 3 cards enable you to get cost to your hand, which is in a way very useful because once I got all spell and trap cards in my hand, but luckily I had 2 Tenenkis and I could activate one of them, bringing a monster to my hand, which enabled me to pull off a big combo and win a duel next turn. But then I'll move on to the trap cards now. There's Bottomless Trap Hole, which a lot of monsters have an effect that activates from the grave. This card banishes them, therefore it's not in the graveyard. Very useful, right? And then I run Torrential Tribute. This card is very useful. I like it. It's one of these cards I like to call them last resort cards. If your opponent has an overpowered beat stick, for example, Utopia Lightning, it can destroy all of that. Which the only drawback to Torrential Tribute is that it destroys your monsters as well if you have a monster on the field. But still highly useful. And then I choose Ring of Destruction also because if you yourself have an overpowered monster, your opponent has an effect that can destroy it, you can counter, both players will take damage, which is highly useful because if you have, for example, if you're playing YGO Pro, Dev Pro, and depending on what life points you start at, this could be very useful and turn the tides of any duel very quickly. Then I have Compulsory Evacuation Device. This card is also very useful because you can return a monster on the field to the hand, which if you have Silent Honor Arc, or your opponent has it, if you want to save a monster, just very useful, you should run it. And then I have Vanity's Emptiness, which is one of those cards I explained earlier. If your opponent has Vanity on the field, it locks down your special summon. So you cannot special summon from the extra deck, which is why I kind of built this deck around that. So, in a way, you can have a way to power up your monsters. But this card is also one of those cards I like to call last resort cards. If your opponent is doing the same thing you're doing with this deck and Xyz summoning like there's no tomorrow, they can't. This locks it down. But the only drawback is you can't special summon too. But it's very useful. Because all you have to do to destroy it is send a card from the deck or field to your own graveyard. And then I run 2 Fiendish Chains. Some people run 3, some people run 1, some people run none. very useful because it negates any monster's effect and it can attack. So, once again, for example, they have Utopia the Lightning, very big beat stick. You can just shut it down, very easy and simple. And then I have Solemn Notice, which some people like to only run one notice, or just one warning, which I also have here. But this monster, when it is special summoned or a monster effect is activated, very simple, you can negate the summon or activation and destroy that card. Which is very easy because, for example, Solemn Notice in a way does only basically the same thing as Solemn Warning. The only drawback is that Notice does monsters, Warning does pretty much any card that special summons a monster. The only drawback is you have to pay 1,500 life points for Solemn and 2,000 for Solemn Warning. Now, I'll move on to the Xyz monsters. It's very simple. I'm running one Nodin, one Panzer, and one Poltemium 7, which, like I said, this card along with Diamond, you can special summon with an Xyz monster that has Constellar in the name, which XYZ materials on that card that you use to XYZ summon Poltemy or Diamond also become Xyz materials to these two cards. So, highly useful, but I run only one of these two. And then, of course, Utopia the Lightning. A lot of people sometimes run Lightning, but it's very useful because you can really power it up. It becomes a gigantic beat stick. Very easy and very simple. Now, I also run Constellar Pleiades because his effect is, of course, pretty much like compulsories. You detach one material, XYZ material from this card, target one card on the field, return it to the hand, which enables you to pull off a big combo. I run two of those. And then, of course, I run number 61, Volcanosaurus, which, it's all I call one of those beat stick monsters. You can detach one XYZ material from this card, target one face-up monster your opponent controls, destroy that target, then your opponent has to take damage equal to that target's attack points. I run one, I may run two in the future, I don't know. But I also run a Satellar Knight Deltros, which his effect is pretty easy. And once again, moving on, there's Constellar Diamond, which it is pretty simple, very easy. I like his effect because if your opponent has a nice back row that they're hoping to use to ruin your game, when you attack, for example, this card is very nice because all Constellar monsters you control are unaffected by spell or trap effects, as long as you detach an XYZ material from it, which is very nice. I like it. And then there's number 82. This card is very nice because if you do have, for example, Tenenki on your field, this card cannot be targeted for an attack. And at the same time, you can detach the one XYZ material this card from that card. This card can attack your opponent directly. And it has 2,000 attack. Nice big difference in attack and defense points. Very easy, very simple. And then we'll move on to Dark Rebellion XYZ Dragon, which is one of these monsters I call beat sticks, which his effect is pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty much the same thing in the anime, only you detach two instead of one. And very useful. I usually run it in almost any and every deck I play. And then I run two Castell, the Skyblaster Musketeer, because it basically does the same thing as Book of Moon. But it also has an additional effect because you can also detach two materials from this card, target one other monster on the field, or one other card that is face up on the field, shuffle it into the deck, and then there you go. Then your opponent might or might not draw it the next turn, which is highly useful for you. And I also run one Silent Honor arc because it's another way of getting rid of, for example, if your opponent has Utopia the Lightning. So, that ends my deck profile of Constellar Diamonds, Pollux, whatever. It ends my deck profile. Let me know what you think in the comments. Should I add, should I change something? I'll leave it up to you guys. And this is Byakuya Kuchiki, out.